Have you ever noticed that the heaviness you carry by mid-afternoon was not born at noon? It was born in the first 7 minutes of your morning, in the way you reached before you were ready, in the way you let the world speak before you had even said a single word to yourself, in the way you skipped the threshold, that sacred, almost invisible space between sleep and waking, and threw yourself into motion before you had any ground beneath your feet. This is not a character flaw. This is what a culture of urgency teaches. It teaches that stillness is laziness, that silence is avoidance, that the person who checks their messages first is the person who is serious about life. But seriousness, as it turns out, is not the same as wisdom, and speed, as it turns out, has very little to do with clarity. There is a weight that builds slowly, not from dramatic failures or sudden losses, but from thousands of mornings begun on the wrong note. Thousands of days that started with anxiety before anxiety had any real cause. The jaw tight before a single difficult word was spoken. The shoulders lifted before a single heavy thing was carried. The mind already rehearsing problems that had not yet arrived, defending against attacks that would never come, bracing, always bracing, as if waking up itself were a form of danger. And beneath all of that movement, beneath the scrolling and the planning and the quiet rushing, there is something quieter still. A question the body has been asking for years, in its own wordless language. Is there another way to begin? Is there a way to wake up that does not feel like falling forward into chaos? Is there a morning that belongs to me fully, gently, without conditions? If you have felt this, the exhaustion of mornings that deplete before the day has even asked anything of you, then what follows is not a program. It is not a productivity system wearing spiritual clothing. It is something older and simpler than that. It is the understanding drawn from centuries of contemplative practice that the way you enter the day quietly shapes everything that follows. Not because of magic, but because the mind is not a machine that switches on, it is a garden. And what you plant in the first hour grows wild through all the hours that come after. If you find these words landing somewhere true inside you, somewhere that recognizes this exhaustion and quietly hopes for relief, consider staying close to this space. There is more here, more depth, more practice, more of this unhurried wisdom, and it will be here whenever you are ready to return. The Buddhist tradition has never been particularly interested in dramatic transformation. It has always been more interested in something smaller and therefore more powerful. The quality of a single breath, taken consciously. The quality of a single moment met with awareness instead of reaction. It teaches with great patience and no urgency that suffering does not usually arrive in catastrophes. It arrives in habits, in the accumulated weight of thousands of small moments lived unconsciously, on autopilot, in the grip of patterns so familiar they have become invisible. And the inverse is also true. Peace does not arrive in breakthroughs. It grows in small, consistent, almost unremarkable acts of presence. This is the foundation of everything that follows. Not that you must change everything, only that you might, beginning tomorrow morning, meet the day just slightly differently than you did today. The first of these practices is the one that makes all others possible. Before the phone, before the news, before the first obligation of the day reaches its hand through the door. There is a window, was brief, fragile, irreplaceable, that exists in the first moments after your eyes open. The mind has not yet fully constructed its story for the day. It has not yet assembled its worries into formation. It is soft, impressionable, open in a way it will not be again until tomorrow morning. And what you bring into that window becomes the emotional weather of everything that follows. The practice is not complicated. It asks only this: when you wake, do not move immediately. Stay still for a moment. Feel the weight of your body where it meets the bed. Notice the quality of the light in the room, whether it is gray and early or golden and late. Notice the sounds that exist before you add your own. And then, before anything else, before the mind begins its familiar inventory of what needs to be done and what has been left undone, take 3 deliberate breaths. Not deep in a performative sense, not the kind that announces itself, simply slower than the breath you are taking in sleep. Feel the air enter, feel the slight expansion of the chest, feel the release. These 3 breaths are not a ritual for its own sake. They are a bridge, and the Buddhist tradition has understood this for a very long time. The breath is the only function of the body that exists entirely in the present tense. It cannot happen yesterday. It cannot happen tomorrow. It is always only now. And when you follow it, even briefly, the mind returns from wherever it was drifting and lands, gently in the actual moment. You arrive in your own morning, not in yesterday's regrets or tomorrow's uncertainties. Here, in this room, in this body, on this specific and unrepeatable day. That arrival changes things, not dramatically, but truly. From that grounded place, the second practice becomes natural. And it is perhaps the most quietly radical of all, because it asks you to look at your life not for what is missing, but for what is already here. The mind has a powerful and well-documented bias toward lack. It is constantly scanning, assessing, comparing, measuring your progress against some imagined standard, measuring your mornings against some version of morning that other people seem to be having. And when it scans for what is missing, it finds it reliably every time, because something is always missing. Something is always incomplete. Something could always be better. This is not pessimism. It is simply how a mind trained by a culture of perpetual improvement tends to operate. The antidote in contemplative practice is not to force positivity or to pretend the gaps do not exist. It is something more precise than that. It is to deliberately redirect attention each morning toward what is genuinely, actually present. 3 things. Not grand things. Not things worthy of a gratitude journal with a leather cover. Small things. The warmth of the blanket. The fact that your lungs drew air all night without being asked. The sound of something outside the window. A bird. A car. The wind moving through whatever trees exist near where you live. A relationship that, however imperfect, still holds something real. The practice is to let these things land, not to list them and move on, but to feel them for a moment, to allow the reality of their presence to register somewhere in the body. When that happens, something shifts in the nervous system. A signal is sent below the level of conscious thought that says, right now something is okay. Right now the ground is holding. And from that signal, a different kind of morning becomes possible. Not a morning free from challenge, but a morning that does not begin already behind. The body has been waiting. This is the third practice. And it asks you to remember something that the pace of modern life makes very easy to forget. You are not a mind that happens to have a body attached to it. You are a whole being. And when you spend the first hours of your day entirely in your head, planning, worrying, scrolling, managing, your body receives a quiet message that it is not important, that it is a vehicle, not a home. And over time, that message accumulates into a particular kind of numbness, a sense of living slightly above your own life, watching it from a slight distance, never quite landing in the actual texture of things. 10 minutes of mindful movement in the morning is not exercise in the way the word is usually meant. It is not about burning or building or improving. It is about arriving. Simple stretches, a slow walk, if you have access to any kind of outdoor space. Movement slow enough that you can actually feel it. The length of your spine as you reach upward, the specific sensation of your foot meeting the ground, heel first, then the slow roll forward to the toe. The Buddhist tradition speaks of walking meditation not as a lesser practice but as a complete one. Every step an opportunity to return, every step the quiet declaration, I am here, I am present in this body, I am not somewhere else in my mind, while my body moves through the world alone. When you move this way, slowly, without destination, without earbuds, without the layered noise of content, Something in the nervous system softens. The breath deepens on its own. The thoughts that felt urgent lose some of their edge. And a peculiar thing happens. Small sensations that would have gone unnoticed become vivid. The temperature of the air, the specific quality of morning light, the sound your feet make on different surfaces, these things were always there. You simply had not slowed down enough to receive them, and in receiving them, you receive something larger, the actual experience of being alive, which is quieter and more nourishing than most of what we consume before noon. The fourth practice is one that requires almost nothing, and yet changes almost everything. Before you stand up from your bed, before the day begins telling you who it needs you to be, you are offered a brief and precious moment of choice. Not the choice of what you will accomplish, not the choice of what you will produce or complete or optimize, the choice of how you will be. An intention is different from a goal. A goal says, I must arrive somewhere specific. An intention says, I want to move through the day like this, with patience, with honesty, with gentleness toward myself and toward whoever I encounter. The goal depends on circumstances. The intention depends only on you. And that distinction matters enormously because circumstances will always be somewhat beyond your control. But the quality of your presence, the steadiness of your attention, the softness of your words, the patience you extend when things do not go as expected, that is always available. Always a choice. The Buddha described a quality called right intention, not as moral command but as compass, not as a standard you must perfectly meet, but as a direction you can always return to, even after you have lost your way. So tomorrow morning, before the lists begin, ask yourself quietly, how do I want to meet what comes today? Let a single word arise. Patience, kindness, clarity, courage, carry it lightly. Not as a burden of self-improvement, but as a lantern, small, steady, just enough light to take the next step. The fifth practice is the one that many people find most unfamiliar, not because it is difficult, but because it asks for something that the culture of individualism rarely encourages. It asks you to extend warmth outward before the day begins, before you have been given any reason to. The practice has a name in the Buddhist tradition, metta, often translated as loving kindness. And its structure is simple enough to do in 3 quiet minutes while still lying in bed. You begin with yourself. You silently wish yourself ease. Not happiness in some performative sense, but genuine ease. The wish that you might be safe, that you might be well, that you might move through this day with a measure of peace. Then you extend that wish to someone you love easily, someone whose face comes to mind without effort, someone whose well-being you already want. Then to someone neutral, someone you encountered recently who exists at the edge of your awareness, the person at the register, the neighbor you have never spoken to. And finally, and this is the part that requires something, to someone difficult, someone whose behavior has cost you something, someone who carries without knowing it some weight of resentment in your chest. You do not extend this wish because they deserve it in any transactional sense. You extend it because carrying resentment is exhausting. Because the person most harmed by the weight of old grievance is almost always the one carrying it. The wish is, may you be well. May you be free from suffering. It does not have to feel true immediately. It only has to be offered. And over time, something remarkable happens. The chest where resentment tends to live as a specific kind of tightness begins to open, not because the difficult person changed, but because you stopped spending your energy holding the door of that old wound closed. If these practices have touched something in you, if there is a quiet recognition that this is the kind of morning you have been wanting, the kind of beginning you have been missing, this space holds more depth, more practice, more of this unhurried, genuinely useful wisdom. Let this be an invitation to stay close to what nourishes you. The sixth practice is so simple that it is easy to dismiss, and yet The contemplative traditions have returned to it for centuries precisely because of that simplicity. Go outside, or if outside is not immediately available, go to a window. Look at something that is not a screen, a tree, if there is one, the sky, whatever the sky looks like this morning. A single cloud moving in whatever direction the wind is taking it. The practice is not to analyze what you see, it is only to see it. To let the fact of the natural world, its complete indifference to your productivity, its unhurried and total self-completion land somewhere in your awareness. A tree does not worry about whether it is growing fast enough. It does not compare itself to other trees. It does not brace against the coming winter. It simply is, fully in the season, in this light, in this moment. And there is a teaching in that, if you allow yourself to receive it. The Buddhist concept of impermanence is not at its core about loss. It is about presence. Because nothing lasts, this moment becomes precious. Because this particular morning light will not arrange itself this way, again it is worth seeing, even briefly, even for 60 seconds before the day accelerates. Nature is not sentimental about this, it simply continues. And when you let yourself be, for a moment, in genuine contact with that continuation, something in the nervous system registers it as safety, as belonging, as the quiet reassurance that the world is larger than your worries and that it will hold you even on the days when holding yourself feels like too much. The seventh practice closes the morning in the most grounded way possible by returning to the body one final time through the simple act of eating. This is not about nutrition in a clinical sense. It is about something the Buddhist tradition calls mindful consumption. The understanding that how we receive nourishment matters as much as what we consume. The practice asks only this. During your first meal of the day, put the phone somewhere else. Turn off the television. Sit down, if you can, and eat. Not while planning, not while scrolling, not while managing the 15 things that will need managing soon enough. Just eat. Feel the warmth of whatever is warm. Notice the specific flavor, not in a performative way, but with genuine curiosity. The way a child tastes something for the first time. Feel the texture. Notice the moment of satisfaction that arrives, briefly when the body receives what it needs. The Buddhist tradition speaks of interrelatedness, the understanding that nothing we consume arrived to us in isolation. The food on your table passed through hands you will never know, through soil and rain and seasons, through work and distance. When you eat with presence, you cannot help but brush against that reality. And that brush, however fleeting, creates a quality of gratitude that does not require effort. It arises naturally, simply from the act of paying attention, from the revolutionary, countercultural, profoundly healing choice to be here, in this body, at this table, in this morning that will not come again. These 7 practices are not a system, they are not a curriculum. They are not steps on a ladder leading to some better version of yourself that waits at the top. They are invitations, imperatives, simple, available, requiring nothing except a willingness to arrive in your own life before the world arrives to fill it. The first breath, the 3 small gratitudes, the 10 minutes of unhurried movement, the single intention carried lightly, the compassion extended in quiet and without audience, the moment of actual contact with the living world outside your window, the meal received with presence. None of these things are large. None of them demand more than you have. And yet, practiced consistently, not perfectly, but consistently, they change something real. Not the circumstances of your life, which will remain as unpredictable and demanding as ever, but your relationship to those circumstances. The ground beneath you becomes a little more solid. The morning becomes a little more yours. And from that ground, from that quiet and genuine sense of having arrived in your own day before the day arrived to take you somewhere else, everything that follows becomes slightly more navigable, slightly more human, slightly more your own. May your mornings grow quieter. May the first breath of each day feel like enough. And may you find in the small and ordinary hours before the world begins a peace that does not ask to be earned. If this reflection has moved something in you, if it has offered even a small measure of clarity or rest, this space will always be here, with more depth, more practice, and more of this gentle, unhurried wisdom, whenever you are ready to return.